Hello there, it's Jennifer here, and thank you so much for stopping by. Today I thought I would share with you a fun way to create window slider cards, and the best part is no special dies are needed. You can get creative with basic die shapes that you have on hand. Today I'll be demonstrating with two very different dies to show you that this can work in many different ways. I think it's best to look at the completed cards to see in which direction we're headed. Here's my second card, which I'll show you a little bit later. It's a 5x7 card, and when you pull the tab at the top, the little penguin changes inside the O of the word joy. But before we do this card, I'll show you how to create this one, which is very different. I made this one for my daughter's virtual teacher. When you pull the tab, the window of the computer screen changes. So I hope that these two very different examples show you that you can get creative with open die shapes that you have, such as an O in the word joy, or the computer screen on this example. You could always use basic circle or square or rectangle dies for this. For this card, I'll be using the new My Favorite Things Virtually the Best stamp set, which I am so excited about. As I mentioned in a previous video, I'm making cards for all the teachers of our school, and this special set can be used for all of the virtual teachers. And a lot of these can be used for non-teachers, so maybe colleagues that you do Zoom calls with, or even for friends, such as a sentiment that says, "Let's make time for FaceTime." It's just such a fitting stamp set for the time that we're in, and the images are fantastic. So I'm using a few of these today to look like Lila and her friends and to look like her main virtual teacher. Let's start by doing that background piece. I've been wanting to use this My Favorite Things stamp. It's been sitting on my desk. It's time to put it to use. I'm using my MISTI stamping tool, and I have a sticky mat that has the stickiness facing up. This will hold our cardstock in place as we stamp on it. This is the My Favorite Things background stamp that I've wanted to use. It's called All Lined Up Diagonally. I'm putting it into my MISTI stamping tool. Close the door to hold it. Now I'll take my craft cardstock piece, which is cut to 4 by 5 1/4. I'll line it up with the pattern on the stamp so that my lines will be straight. Close the MISTI upside down and then flip it over. And the sticky mat will grab onto the brown cardstock and hold it while we stamp on it. I'm using unicorn white pigment ink. I love the look of white pigment ink stamped on a craft cardstock piece. I feel like it's a look that goes with any style of card and with any colors you choose. I use an eraser for a dry erase board to help me press along my MISTI to get good ink coverage. When done, I can just wipe my sticky mat with a baby wipe, and it's been holding up for a long time, even if it gets inky and I clean it. Okay, so I next am using the My Favorite Things monitor die set. This is what I will use to create my window. I think a monitor die set is fun because so many of us are doing Zoom calls and FaceTime that it's fun to incorporate on a card. So this actually has the frame for the computer and then a die that's slightly smaller that cuts the window. So I'm using the frame pieces and then the others, there's even little word bubble dies in here, cutting them a few times from white cardstock, and then the computer monitor pieces I'm cutting also from light gray. So this is the monitor cut from light gray, and now I'm taking the slightly smaller screen die in the set and cutting that from the center. This will form a thin frame for our monitor that will put around our window on the front of the card. So basically, I'm creating this monitor die cut, and the opening in the center, the screen, will be the window on my card. If you don't have a die set like this, you could definitely use 2 rectangle dies and kind of make your own monitor if you wanted to, or you could do whatever shape window you want. Then I will glue the pieces together. So I put the light gray pieces on top and the white pieces behind it just to build up some dimension. I like to do white cardstock behind my colored just so that I don't use up my colored cardstock as much. I have a lot more white cardstock and it's not as expensive. So building up layers with white cardstock makes sense to me in most cases. Next, I'm figuring out where I want to stamp my sentiment. I'll stamp with black ink right on top of our background. I did heat set that white pigment ink to make sure that it's dry. It's always good to do that so you don't smear it because it is a pigment ink. I decided I wanted this stand for my monitor to be a little bit shorter, so I cut it, and that will allow me to put my window a little bit lower. When you're making cards like this, it's good for your window to be about centered on your card. which I'll talk about more later. So I stamp my first sentiment on the front here, and later I will stamp a second sentiment on the inside. Now it's time to create our window for the window changing card. So I have the window die, or the screen die from the die set. I'm lining it up right at the center. It's very close to center on this piece. And I'll run that through my die cut machine. I want to make sure this is straight, so I'll use a T-ruler to be sure. Whenever you do a window slider card like I'm showing you today, it's best to have this window about centered on the card. You don't want anything too tall either, because you need room for the sliding images, which you'll see. So a sideways rectangle like this is best. Now it's time to create that white slider piece. I like to start with a piece of white cardstock that is a little bit taller than our background piece. So our background piece here, as I mentioned, the brown piece, is 4 by 5 1/4. So since it's 5 1/4 inches tall, I make the white piece 5 1/2 inches tall. Now for how wide it is, I just like it to be about 1/4 of an inch wider on both sides than our window. So this white piece is a little bit wider than our window opening. So you can see it would slide up inside of there, and it's a little bit wider than the window opening. Next, we need to draw a little pencil line where we want to stamp our images. So I'm flipping this over, and I'm taking our slider piece, and I'm putting it close to the bottom there, and centering it from side to side. So you can see it's hanging out the top. I'll use a little bit of temporary tape just to hold it there. Now I'll flip it over and use a pencil to trace in the window. This will be our first scene. This will be the scene that you see when the card is closed, when they open up the envelope. Next, I need to trace a window below that for our second scene, but it's hard to see through to make sure it's centered. So I'll take the actual window die itself. I'm just cheating here. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I'll trace inside of the window, making sure that this is slightly lower than the window we've already traced. Okay, so let's just test this out. I'll put it behind our craft piece, and you can see how here is the first window, and when you pull the top, it moves to the second window. I think tracing these windows is probably the hardest part of this, but really it's not that hard at all to do. You just want to make sure you choose a window die that gives you enough room to trace 2 of those shapes, one at the center of the white cardstock and one below it. Okay, so now it's time to do our stamping inside of those traced rectangles. In the middle rectangle, I'm stamping 3 little kids. One looks like Lila and 2 of her friends. And then in the bottom rectangle, I'm stamping the teacher. Don't worry if your stamp images hang out of your pencil line. It's not a problem. No one will ever see it. I then will erase those lines. Now, before I take the time to color this, I want to make sure it works. I don't want to put this all together after coloring it and realize it doesn't work, so I like to start assembling it, then color it. Now, you'll notice that there was a bit of room underneath our bottom penciled triangle. I'm going to cut a little bit of that off. I normally end up going and cutting about 1/4 of an inch off of the bottom of these sliders. So it ends up being about the same height as that brown piece, our background piece. But it's good to have that extra room there that in case you need it, you have it. But I did cut it off here along the bottom. I also like to round the corners, especially on the top, just to give it a smooth look. Next, we'll stamp my favorite things, interactive labels. This little set, which is a great price point because it's small, has little words that are great for stamping on interactive cards. So I stamped pull on the top of our slider piece. Next, we need to create the stopper. We want to put a stopper on the bottom of our slider piece so they can't pull the slider piece out of the card. So I have this little strip of white cardstock here, and I'm putting double-sided tape that's strong on the back bottom of our slider. And then I will glue it onto this white cardstock scrap. Notice the white cardstock scrap is a little bit wider than the slider, so it sticks out about 1/4 of an inch on each side. That's what will make it a stopper. Very easy to do, doesn't matter what color it is, just use a scrap to create a stopper. Now I'm holding our slider in our first position. So this is with the kids showing, and I'm putting some temporary tape on the back. This is just so it holds in place, so we know where to put our double-sided tape to glue it onto a note card. This note card is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, which is slightly bigger than our brown background piece. So I'm using foam tape for this. You could use foam squares, whatever you prefer. I do need narrow pieces for this, so I'm just cutting right down the middle of my foam tape to make it narrow to work along the sides of this card. So I'm putting pieces right along the edge, right up against the stopper. See how it goes very close to the little stopper edge there on the bottom of the screen? And then I will put a piece along the bottom. This will keep the slider card inside of our card and doesn't allow it to slide out the bottom. Then I'll put a piece on the other side too, close to the stopper. So we have along the bottom of the stopper and along the sides of the stopper. So this is the closed position. If you want to, you can trace the sides of your slider just so you know the positioning for the next step, but I ended up not using that. But if it helps you, that's an option to do too. Now I'm holding the slider in its second position, so framing around the teacher, and then I will put tape on this to hold it still so that we can put foam tape on the sides up to the stopper. So this is really easy. I'm taking foam tape like before, and I'll fill in those channels above the stopper. So this piece of foam tape that I'm putting here will cause the slider to stop when they pull it, so it doesn't come out. And it allows it to stop at that second scene where the teacher is framed. So after you've seen me do it here and in the next card, you'll see that this is a very easy process to figure out with whatever card you make. I think you just need to see it a couple of times. And that's it. I do like to press a little anti-static powder tool against my foam tape to make sure no adhesive is exposed. Now I'm going to do a quick test run before we do coloring. I'm just holding it against my work surface and seeing if the slider works. And it sure does. It goes from the first scene to the second scene. So now I can take the time to color it. Now that I know it's going to work, let's do our coloring. So I did the coloring off screen, nothing fancy, I just used Copic markers. And then I will also glue the monitor pieces that we die cut to go around the window frame. So remember we die cut these earlier. I'll just glue them around that. Now we can assemble our card together. So I will take our slider piece and I will hold it behind there. We want to make sure it's in place when we take off the foam tape release paper to add it to our card. So I'll put a little piece of tape up here just to hold it in the center. We don't want the slider to shift and end up against a piece of foam tape and stuck in that position. Okay, so now I'll remove the release paper from all of our foam tape and then hold the slider in place as we add this to the front of our white note card. And this is the point where we do a little happy dance because it worked out so well. So I'm actually going to make more of these cards, believe it or not. Now that I have the measurements, all I need to do is cut a bunch of pieces, stamp them, and then I'll have my daughter and her friends do the coloring of the images. Coloring is definitely the most time consuming for me, and that would be a fun way to incorporate their work onto the card. I also could skip the background stamping and instead use pattern paper if I wanted. I added a little speech bubble with a heart stamped in the center. I covered the heart with Tonic Aqua Shimmer Pen and Ranger Glossy accents to give it a little bit of sparkle and shine. And that's it for the card. I did stamp another sentiment on the inside since the stamp set comes with many great teacher sentiments. But here you can see how it's a very basic, simple looking card, but when you pull the tab, you see a different image. So you could do any kind of scene changing with a window design. Just make sure that your window die is a bit wider and not as tall, so you have room for the scenes to slide up and down behind your front panel. If you have a die that has a bigger opening, just make a bigger card. So in this case, I did a 5x7 card so that I could do a sliding feature behind the O in the word joy. I really wanted to make this work, and so a bigger card was the best solution. So you could do this with 5x7 or even a slimline card. Here's a quick look again at the completed card so you know which direction we're headed as we create this. I'll be using the My Favorite Things Holiday Penguins stamp set. You could use any images here, any little critters would be perfect, but I am just loving these cute little penguins, especially the one holding the present and the one with the ornaments. Now for this 5x7 card, I'm starting with 2 pieces of white cardstock that are slightly smaller. So they are cut to 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. I'm using the Sending Christmas Joy die from My Favorite Things. This is a new one, nice and large. And I am die cutting it from one of these panels so that the O that I'm using as a window is about centered on the card panel. The reason I'm cutting it from one piece is we'll do an inlay into this piece of each of the different letters. So we'll glue it onto the other piece for a backing. But first I need to cut a window through the O of that second piece. So instead of using the die again, which will just cut more letters, I'm tracing inside of the O onto the second piece. Now I can cut this out. It doesn't have to be cut out nicely. In fact, I cut it pretty jagged, but you just want your cutting to be a little bit outside of the pencil line. That way, when we glue the die cut piece on top of this, you'll have an opening for the O. So these two pieces will be glued together and form the front of our card. Next, I'm covering the more solid piece with lots of adhesive. You could use glue stick here, whatever adhesive you want. I just use tape runner. You want to make sure to put a lot at the top in the area where we'll be doing inlay. So once I have that covered, I'll lay this on top. And now in each of those letter openings is exposed adhesive. Later, I'll add some letters in there. Again, I don't want to take the time to add all those letters if this doesn't work out. So we're going to test it out first. But there is exposed adhesive inside of all of those letters. Now for our slider on this card, I cut a piece that is a little bit taller than our background. So this is 7 inches tall. And it's a little wider than the width of our window opening. So you can see here it's about 1/4 of an inch wider on each side of the O. Now we'll trace the 2 spots where we'll do our stamping. This is where we can make sure that this card's going to work before we get too far into it. So I'm holding the piece a little bit from the bottom, but at the center of the card. So you can see it's taped there. Now I'll trace the first O in. This will be the first position, what you'll see when the card is closed. Now we're going to see if we have enough room for another O down there, and it turns out we do. So I will trace another O down there. I didn't get it exactly centered, but that's okay. I just needed a general idea. So you can see how the bottom window is close to the bottom of our slider piece. Now I've picked 2 images to stamp inside of each of the window spots. You'll notice the images are much bigger than the openings, but that's okay. As long as the main part of the image is showing through the O, we're set. Okay, let's test this out. Here's the closed position, and here's when we pull it. And I'm feeling pretty confident this is going to come out okay, so I went ahead and colored those images. Next, I just did a quick corner rounding onto our slider piece. I just like to round the top corners because I feel like it looks nice and finished when it's closed, but you could leave it pointed if you prefer. Next, I'm creating a little stopper from the bottom. I trimmed a tiny bit off the bottom. You want to make that bottom of the slider piece as close to your bottom stamped image as you can. On the back, I put double-sided tape. Now I'm putting a scrap of cardstock strip on there, and then I will cut it so it's about 1/4 of an inch sticking off on each side. Now it's time to add the foam tape to the back. I'll start by temporarily taping the slider in place in its closed position so that the first penguin shows through the window. So I'm putting some temporary tape back there. And now we can put foam tape around that, all the way up to the slider on the bottom and on the right and left. Now this is a bigger card, so I use more foam tape for this. If you prefer, you can stack up cardstock strips from like scrap cardstock that you have to build the dimension. But notice that my foam tape goes right up against the bottom of the stopper and then close to those little stopper edges sticking out. You don't want it too tight. You want a little bit of wiggle room, but not too much. Next, we need to add the foam tape for the stopper. So we'll move our slider up to the second position so that the second image is showing. This is what it'll look like when it's pulled open. I'll temporarily tape it there, and then I will put foam tape on the left and the right above the little stopper. So really you're basically creating a channel in the back, but then adding 3 extra pieces, one along the bottom and on the sides above the stopper to keep your slider piece from coming out of the card. I then added it to a red 5x7 note card and tested out, and there it works just great. So now all I need to do is add in my letters. So I used the same Sending Christmas Joy die to cut from pool colored, red colored, and green colored cardstock. And I'm just adding those die cut layers into our opening. So I had that exposed adhesive still, so this is really quick to do. I did decide to add a little sparkle to the card by adding some little snowflakes. I die cut these from silver glitter cardstock and glued them around on the card. So here is a look at the completed card. I hope that by doing two very different examples, you can get inspired to give this a try with whatever products you have. So the key is to make your window close to the center of your card. You can do a larger card if needed. You will need to make sure there's room for your main image at the center and then one below it so that you can do the slider feature. You can use a die that's as wide as you want, but not too tall. If you like this idea and think I should do another video showing more examples so that you can give this a try too, let me know below in the comments. If you're interested in the different products I talked about today, they're linked below in my YouTube description, but please head over to my blog where I have all the information you could possibly need, including photos of the cards. If you're interested in other interactive card designs, you can check out the 2 videos in the center. I am so thankful that you're here with me today. I hope you have a good week and take care.